Most people think their smart doorbell sees everything. That's a lie. They only see what moves directly in front of them, and only when they decide to wake up. There are gaps, reset periods, technical blind spots. Chloe's story isn't about ghosts or monsters. It's about what happens when someone knows the flaws in your security system better than you do, and uses your own feeling of safety as a weapon against you. Chloe lived alone in a single-story house at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. She wasn't paranoid, just cautious. She had installed a top-of-the-line Sentinel Pro doorbell camera that sent a notification to her phone if a leaf so much as twitched on her porch. At first, she checked every alert. After 3 months, it had become background noise. A stray cat at 2 a.m.? Swipe. The garbage truck at 5 a.m. Swipe. The wind shaking the hydrangea bush. Swipe. On this particular Tuesday night, it was 11:45 p.m. Chloe was in bed, reading. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Movement detected. Front door. She sighed. She knew it was the hydrangea bush. It was windy outside. She almost didn't check, but old habits die hard. She opened the app. The live feed loaded in black and white, possessing that grainy clarity typical of infrared night vision. The porch was empty. The bush was barely moving. "Stupid machine," she whispered, about to close the app. That's when she noticed it. At the very bottom right of the screen, right at the bleeding edge of the camera's wide-angle view, there was a shape. It wasn't a bush. It was a shoe. A worn sneaker, motionless on the edge of her driveway. Chloe sat up straight in bed. Her heart gave an unpleasant jolt. She pinched the screen to zoom. The shoe was attached to a leg, covered by dark jeans. The rest of the body was out of frame, hidden by the garage wall. Someone was there, just standing next to her house, perfectly still. She didn't call the police immediately. Rationality took over. Maybe it was a neighbor who had too much to drink and confused the houses. A teenager playing a stupid prank. She pressed the microphone button on the app. Her voice came out of the exterior speaker, tiny and metallic in the silent night. "Hello? Can I help you? You are on private property." No reaction. The shoe didn't move a millimeter. The stranger didn't seem to hear, or didn't care. Chloe checked the time. 11:52 p.m. She decided to wait 5 minutes. If he was still there, she would call 911. She kept the video feed open, staring at that shoe. The minutes stretched out, amplified by the silence of the house. She heard the usual creaks of settling wood, the hum of the refrigerator, normal sounds that suddenly felt threatening. At 11:57 p.m., the shoe moved. The man took a step. He walked fully into the camera's field of view. He didn't approach the door. He just went and planted himself in the middle of the driveway, about 15 feet from the house. He wore a gray hoodie, the hood pulled up, casting his face in deep shadow. His hands were in his pockets. He just stood there, facing the house. He wasn't looking at the front door. He was looking directly at the camera lens. It was the stillness that was terrifying. He wasn't trying to force the lock. He wasn't prowling around windows. He was just staring at the lens. Chloe had her finger hovering over the emergency call button when the man did something strange. He slowly took a hand out of his pocket. He was holding his own smartphone. He raised his phone to face level. The screen turned towards the doorbell camera. Chloe zoomed in on the man's phone screen. The image was tiny, blurry, due to distance and resolution, but she could make out what the man was looking at. He was watching a live video feed. On the screen of the man's phone, Chloe saw a color image taken from a high angle. It was the interior of a house. She saw a familiar living room, a beige sofa, a coffee table with a specific book on it. Chloe's blood ran cold. That was her living room. That was her coffee table. The man on the porch wasn't looking at her house from the outside. He was watching the inside of her house. How? She didn't have interior cameras. She had always refused to install them for privacy reasons. The man moved his thumb on his screen, as if swiping to change camera views. The image on his phone changed. It was now a view of a bedroom plunged in semi-darkness, lit only by the bluish glow of a cell phone. On the tiny screen, Chloe saw a bed and a woman sitting in it, frozen with fear, looking at her own phone. Chloe slowly raised her eyes from her screen. She looked around her actual bedroom. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating. She understood. The man outside wasn't the threat. The man outside was the audience. He was watching a show. The threat was already inside. Chloe's brain tried to process the information. How? She had checked all the doors before bed. The alarm was set. Then she remembered the flaw, the blind zone. Her specific model of doorbell camera had a known limitation. After recording a motion event, it needed about 30 seconds to reset and upload before it could detect motion again. 30 seconds during which it was effectively blind. She frantically opened the app's event history. 11:15 p.m. Motion detected. It was the neighbor's cat crossing the porch. 11:45 p.m. Motion detected. The hooded man arriving at the edge of the driveway. Between 11:15 p.m. and 11:45 p.m., there was a 30-minute gap. But she looked closely at the 11:15 p.m. clip. The cat passes. The camera records for 1 minute. Then the clip ends. The camera entered reset mode at 11:16 p.m. and 30 seconds. That's when they got in. Someone had triggered the camera with the cat, or waited for it to trigger. And during the 30 seconds of blindness that followed, someone else had slipped through the side window of the living room, the one Chloe sometimes left slightly cracked open for air. The one that was outside the camera's field of view. The man outside was only there to draw her attention to the front door, to make her stare at her phone, to keep her from noticing the subtle sounds in the hallway, like the very faint creak of the floorboards right outside her bedroom door. Chloe didn't scream. Pure terror stole her breath. She dropped her phone onto the duvet. The video feed still showed the man outside, immobile, holding his phone up like a trophy. The bedroom doorknob began to turn, slowly, silently. Chloe bolted from the bed, rushing into the attached master bathroom. She slammed the door and locked the ridiculous little privacy latch. She curled up in the bathtub, dialing 911 with fingers shaking so badly she had to try 3 times. As she whispered frantically to the operator, She heard her bedroom door open. She heard heavy footsteps on the carpet. Then silence returned. She heard her own voice coming from the bedroom. Not her real voice, but her voice recorded earlier by the outside camera. "Hello. Can I help you? You are on private property." The intruder was in her bedroom. He had picked up her phone from the bed. He was replaying the recording of her attempting to contact the man outside. Then she heard a small chuckle, a man's laugh, deep, right on the other side of the bathroom door. And finally, the most terrifying sound of the night, the mechanical shutter sound of her own phone's camera taking a picture. Click. They were taking a picture of the bathroom door. The police arrived 4 minutes later, sirens wailing. They found the hooded man outside. He didn't resist. He was a 19-year-old kid, paid $50 by a stranger on the internet to stand in that driveway at that exact time and watch a video link he had been sent. He knew nothing. Inside, the house was empty. The living room window was wide open. The intruder hadn't stolen anything. No jewelry, no money. But on Chloe's phone, found lying on her bed, the camera app was still open. And in the phone's photo gallery, there was a new picture taken just minutes ago. It was a photo of Chloe, curled up in her bathtub, taken from over the top of the bathroom door by someone holding the phone high above it. Chloe moved the next day. She never installed a camera again. She knows now that if you can see them on a screen, they can see you too. And sometimes the danger isn't on the screen. It's right behind you, looking over your shoulder. Sarah didn't like the house. It was a fixer-upper in a rural part of the Berkshires, surrounded by trees that seemed to lean a little too close to the roof. But after her divorce, it was all she could afford. To feel safe, she installed a high-end security system. The centerpiece was the Guardian 360, a doorbell camera with night vision, two-way audio, and human-shaped detection. The first week was quiet, too quiet. The only notifications Sarah got were from the local mail carrier and the occasional deer that triggered the motion sensor. She began to relax. She began to believe the silence was just silence. Then came the Tuesday evening. It was 6:14 p.m. Sarah was in the kitchen, boiling pasta. The sun had already dipped behind the ridge, leaving the woods in a deep, bruised purple light. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Movement at front door. She swiped the screen. The feed showed a man. He was wearing a neon yellow delivery vest, a baseball cap pulled low, and he was carrying a large rectangular box wrapped in brown paper. He didn't look up at the camera. He simply placed the box on the mat, stood back, and took a photo of it with his phone. Standard procedure. But then he didn't leave. He stood there for 60 seconds. Sarah watched the timer on the bottom of the screen. 6:15. 6:16. He was looking at her door. Not the handle, but the wood itself, as if he were trying to see through it. "Can I help you?" Sarah said into the talk feature of the app. Her voice sounded thin and metallic coming through the small speaker on the porch. The man didn't jump. He didn't even flinch. He slowly tilted his head toward the camera. Under the brim of the hat, Sarah couldn't see eyes. She only saw shadows. "Wrong house," the man whispered. The audio on the Guardian 360 was high fidelity. She heard the wet click of his tongue. She heard the rustle of his vest. "Oh, sorry," Sarah replied, feeling a flush of embarrassment. "Just leave it there. I'll call the company, or you can take it back." "No," the man said. "It's the right house, but you're in the wrong place." He turned and walked down the steps. He didn't have a truck. He just walked into the tree line and vanished. Sarah waited 20 minutes before opening the door. She scanned the tree line with a powerful flashlight, seeing nothing but the silver trunks of birch trees. She grabbed the box and pulled it inside, locking the 3 deadbolts behind her. The box was heavy. It had no return address, no tracking number, just her name, Sarah, written in thick black marker. Her hands trembled as she cut the tape. Inside, she expected to find a mistake, a neighbor's order maybe. Instead, she found a pile of old VHS tapes, dozens of them. None of them had labels. At the bottom of the box was a small Polaroid photo. It was a picture of her, not a photo she had taken. A photo taken through her living room window, from the porch, dated yesterday, 10:45 p.m. In the photo, she was sitting on the sofa, reading a book, completely unaware of the lens just inches away from the glass. Sarah felt a wave of nausea. She looked at the doorbell camera app. She checked the history for 10:45 p.m. the previous night. The history was empty. According to the cloud server, nothing had moved on her porch for a 6-hour window. But the photo was proof. Someone had been there. Someone knew how to bypass the sensors. Or worse, the camera was choosing what to show her. That night, Sarah didn't go to bed. She sat in the dark hallway, where she had a clear view of the front door. She kept the app open, the live feed glowing like a ghostly portal in her hand. At 2 a.m., the feed started to glitch. It wasn't a signal drop. It was a drop in the frame rate. The smooth 30 frames per second video stuttered down to 5, then 2, then 1. It looked like a slideshow. Slide 1, the porch is empty. Slide 2, a figure is standing at the bottom of the steps. Slide 3, the figure is halfway up the steps. Slide 4, the figure is standing directly in front of the door. In the real world, the house was silent. Sarah stared at the door. No one was there. No shadow blocked the moonlight under the crack. But on the screen, the figure was raising a hand. It wasn't the delivery man. It was a woman. She had long, matted hair and was wearing the same sweater Sarah was wearing right now. The woman on the screen leaned into the camera. It was Sarah. But it was a broken version of her. Her jaw hung at an impossible angle. Her eyes were wide, the pupils blown out until the iris disappeared. The other Sarah tapped on the camera lens. Clink, clink, clink. Sarah heard the sound. It didn't come from the porch. It came from her phone. But then she heard it again. A faint, physical tapping against the wood of the door in front of her. Clink, clink, clink. "Who's there?" Sarah screamed, throwing the phone. She grabbed the VHS tapes and threw them into the fireplace, lighting them with a frantic hand. The plastic melted, filling the room with a toxic black smoke. She didn't care. She wanted every trace of this wrong house gone. As the tapes burned, the doorbell began to ring. Not once, not twice. It began to ring in a rhythmic, melodic pattern. It sounded like a nursery rhyme. Sarah looked at the phone on the floor. The screen was cracked, but the feed was still live. The other Sarah was standing on the porch, pressing the doorbell button over and over. "Let me in, Sarah," the woman on the screen said. Her voice was an exact replica of Sarah's voice. "The latency is over. I'm ready to be the original." Sarah realized she couldn't trust her senses. If the camera was showing her something that wasn't physically there, it meant the system had been proxied. In cybersecurity, a proxy is a middleman. Someone had inserted themselves between the camera and her eyes. Every image she saw was being filtered, edited, and delayed by the person in the yellow vest. She ran to the kitchen and grabbed a hammer. She was going to smash the camera. She was going to tear the wires out of the wall. She threw open the front door, ready to strike. The porch was empty. The cold night air rushed into the house, smelling of pine and damp earth. She looked at the Guardian 360 unit. The small blue light was spinning. It was recording her. She raised the hammer. "Wait," a voice said. It didn't come from the woods. It didn't come from a speaker. It came from the house. Sarah turned around. In the living room, the TV had turned itself on. It was playing the live feed from the doorbell. Sarah saw herself on the TV, standing on the porch with a hammer, looking back into the house. But in the TV's version of the living room, someone was standing behind her. It was the delivery man. He was holding a Polaroid camera. Flash. Sarah felt the light hit the back of her head. She spun around, swinging the hammer into the empty air of her living room. There was no one there. She looked back at the TV. The delivery man was gone, but the other Sarah was now sitting on the sofa. She was holding the hammer. She was looking at the camera with a wide, horrific smile. "The swap is 99% complete," the TV Sarah said. Sarah looked at her own hands. They were becoming transparent. She could see the floorboards through her palms. She tried to scream, but the sound that came out was a digital stutter, a 404 error of the soul. The police arrived 2 days later. Sarah's sister had called for a welfare check after Sarah stopped answering her texts. The house was perfectly clean. The bed was made. The fireplace was cold, containing only the melted remains of some plastic ribbons. The lead officer checked the security system. He was impressed by the setup. "Everything looks normal here," he told the sister. The logs show Sarah leaving the house at 3 a.m. on Wednesday. She walked down the driveway, got into a truck, and drove away. She looked happy. "That's impossible," the sister cried. "Sarah doesn't have a truck, and she would never leave without her phone." The officer found the phone on the living room floor. He swiped it open. There was one saved video in the favorites folder. He played it. The video was from the doorbell camera. It showed Sarah standing on the porch, looking directly into the lens. She looked healthy. Her hair was brushed. She looked better than she had in years. "Hi, everyone," the Sarah on the screen said. "I'm moving to a better place. The resolution here is amazing. Don't look for me. I'm already home." The officer frowned. He looked at the camera unit on the porch. The blue light was blinking. He didn't notice that on the screen of the phone, his own reflection was starting to look a little too perfect. He didn't notice that his own face was beginning to lose its wrinkles. He just closed the app and walked away. But as he left, the doorbell rang. He turned around. The porch was empty. But on the camera's internal server, the proxy was already beginning to render a new officer. One with 7 fingers. One who never needed to sleep.
Mark moved into the Obsidian for one reason: total security. In a city like Chicago, a 22nd floor luxury apartment with biometric locks and a 24/7 concierge felt like a fortress. He controlled everything: lights, temperature, and his doorbell camera through a single encrypted app. He felt untouchable. Then the maintenance glitch began. Every night at exactly 2:14 a.m., Mark's phone would ping with a dead-cold notification. Front door camera offline. Check connection. For exactly 10 minutes, his digital eyes went dark. At 2:24 a.m., it would flicker back to life as if nothing had happened. Mark brought it up to the building manager, Mr. Vance. Vance didn't even look up from his desk. "It's a scheduled server refresh, Mark. The whole building's smart grid resets at that time. Don't be paranoid." But Mark was paranoid. He decided to stay awake. On a rainy Sunday night, Mark sat in his dark living room staring at the front door. He didn't use his phone. He didn't want the light to give him away. He sat in the absolute silence of the 22nd floor. 2:14 a.m. His wall-mounted control tablet dimmed. Signal lost. Seconds later, a sound broke the silence. It wasn't a knock or a scrape. It was a familiar high-pitched beep-boop, the exact sound his door made when a master keycard was used. The heavy deadbolt slid back with a mechanical clack. The door didn't open. It just sat there, unlocked. Mark sat frozen on the sofa, his breath hitching. He expected a thief, a killer, a monster. But the handle never turned. For 10 minutes, the door remained unlocked and silent. Then the beep-boop sounded again. The bolt slid shut. The camera came back online. The next morning, Mark didn't call Vance. He went to a local tech shop and bought a battery-powered nanny cam that didn't require Wi-Fi. He hid it inside a hollowed-out book on his bookshelf, pointing it directly at the front door. That evening, he went to a friend's house and pulled up the footage. On the video, the hallway outside was pitch black. At 2:14 a.m., the front door swung open. A man walked in. He was wearing the building's blue maintenance uniform. Mark recognized him instantly. It was the night porter, a man who had helped Mark carry his groceries just last week. The porter didn't go for the TV. He didn't look for cash. He walked slowly into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and took a long drink of milk directly from the carton. Then he walked into the living room and sat on Mark's sofa, the exact spot Mark had been sitting the night before. For 8 minutes, the man sat in total darkness, staring at Mark's closed bedroom door. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just sat there, breathing, inhabiting Mark's life. Just before the 10-minute mark, he stood up, wiped his mouth, and walked out. Terrified, Mark rushed back to the apartment to pack. But as he looked at the ceiling to grab his suitcase from the top shelf, he noticed something: a smudge of grease on a ceiling tile near the smoke detector. He climbed a chair and pushed the tile up. It wasn't just a gap for wires. Above the drop ceiling was a 3-foot service crawl space that ran the length of the entire floor. Inside, Mark found a nest, a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, and a tablet mounted to the concrete. The tablet was showing 4 live feeds. One was Mark's living room, one was his bathroom, one was his bedroom. The porter hadn't just been visiting. He had been living above him, watching him through the very security system Mark had paid for. The server refresh at 2:14 a.m. wasn't a glitch. It was the porter turning on a signal jammer so he could enter the apartment without being logged by the software. Mark grabbed his keys and ran for the door. He gripped the handle, but it wouldn't budge. He tried the manual deadbolt, but it felt like it was welded shut. Suddenly, his apartment's smart speakers crackled to life. A calm, distorted voice filled the room. "The system is in emergency lockdown mode, Mark, for your safety." Mark looked at the wall tablet. The camera feed was back. It showed the hallway. The porter was standing right outside the door, holding a master control unit. He looked into the camera lens and smiled, a slow, knowing grin. "I told you the system was refreshing," the porter's voice whispered through the speakers. Mark was never seen again. When the police finally bypassed the lockdown 3 days later, the apartment was empty. The smart home was behaving perfectly. But in the server logs, the owner of the unit had been changed. Mark's name was gone. The new owner was simply listed as User 0, Administration.